Mai Hawaii ki Hawaii nui, Hawaii poko, Hawaii loa. Mai Hawaii nui a kea, a hiki loa aku I ka ʻaina o nā ʻōiwi o Māleka. Ka ʻaina heno heno I kapa ʻia o Turtle Island. Aloha kēia o ko lā. A pela no I hoa maka maka o like ʻole o ka honua Velina o aloha. Ua he wā kēia I ka hoʻola ka a ola no hoʻi ka mauhia ka mua a I kekahi kapa. Mai lalo mai holo I luna I ka lewalani. Mai nā holi lono o nā mauna kiʻekiʻe ua nei. Ke pule nei. E kuna auhea ʻoukou. Eia mamo na ka wowo ʻoukou e lā alana e nei I ko mākou leo maikaʻi o ke Ke nonoe aku nei mākou I ka pāhola mau o ke aloha a me ka maluhia ma ka ʻaina nei. E ka o mai I kai ko I loko ka weli o nā huaʻōlelo a mākou e lohe ka makaʻu o nā koho e eha mākou e kā mau ka ʻinea e ʻike ʻia nei ma honua ma ke kaiāulu a pela ole aku. Hoki hopohopo ka naʻau na pōpikia ka ʻeha o loko a me hema o mākou. Olu mokumoku hua e hoʻomālamalama ʻia ko mākou mau manaʻo e ʻiʻo. E hōmaiʻiwo a me ka auau iā mākou nei ia wā pupu hulu o ka honua. E kūkulu no mākou. ʻOiai na ʻoukou no mākou e pale, e mālama, e alakaʻi, e ola. E ke akupuna loa a me kupuna kiwa. Ka mea I kulia I ka nuu a ku ʻiʻo. E hoʻomaikaʻi aku mākou I koʻokou inoa me ka ʻoukou mau hana nui. E ʻoluʻolu, e hōmai ka malu ka naʻauao a me ke aloha. A mama, ua noa. Aloha mai no kākou. As we gather today via digital platforms, I want to acknowledge the unceded lands and territories that we currently own, indigenous peoples of those lands. During these times, unprecedented, crucial Pacific Islanders, Asians, Latinx, Black and Indigenous peoples to draw upon our collective spirit to set our intent. We recognize that we descend from cultures that value our land bases, see life in all aspects of our environment, cherish our elders and ancestors, as well as wisdom and practices. These values are our collective strength and spirit that we invoke to dismantle systemic racism and oppressive structures that we navigate daily. Pa'akako. We must be steadfast in our intentions and strategic movements, steadfast in our solidarity. We thank you for the honor of your time. This episode is a moment in transition to the source, which was focused on in CAATA ConFest will pivot into a new series of episodes to the rise of anti-Asian hate across America. I'd like to call Leilani Chan, my co-chair for the 2022 ConFest, to share her thoughts and orient us here today.
To this virtual series last year when it became could not gather due to the pandemic. We wanted this series to begin a conversation to begin conversations happen at ConFest. This series has since become a with and colleagues and to address the time. From George Floyd's murder in Minneapolis to the murders of 8 Asian women in Atlanta last month, the murder of a 16-year-old Chuukese boy in Hawaii by the Honolulu police Honolulu police officer. Yesterday's police shot a 20-year-old in the 20s once again. Our hearts go with you. It has been a lot. It has been a year of keeping our families safe while mourning our friends and relatives who have passed from COVID-19. This monthly grounding and conversation with each other and with you has been a lifeline for myself, the CAATA board, membership, and I hope for you, the viewer, as well. A way to combat isolation and find community, even if only online. Even if to sit in the sadness and anger together as we process, transition, and pivot. I keep asking, how can we use this in our work? But in many ways, it is too soon to know. As my dear friend and board member Diane has said to me, we are all the walking wounded. We need to be gentle with ourselves and each other and set intention and understanding across clans, tribes, color lines, which makes me so pleased to be part of this announcement that under the leadership of CAATA's board president, Leslie Ishii, President KT Shorb, CAATA will be transitioning this virtual series, Return to the Source, and we gladly pass on in support.
Absolutely, absolutely.
We had hoped that we would be in person for the National Asian American Theater Conference Festival next month. However, no, it is soon to gather in person, and we feel that we want to ensure that we keep both the residents of Hawaii safe as well as ours. And we want our gathering to be big. So ConFest will take place 2022. Make the change in your calendar. Be sure to become a CAATA member and like CAATA on Facebook and all the social media platforms. Kua and I will be back and have updates for you on the plan your trip to be with us all together. And we will be back with definitive information as we're able to share. Hi.
Yes.
Any other thoughts, Heidi, before we pass it on?
Take care, be safe, healthy, holistically healthy. We can convene when we'll be able to welcome me.
And with that, on this episode.
Thank you so much for opening. Really appreciate it for your service. And they're not going for y'all. They'll be back in the program in a little bit. But thank you for your leadership. Thank you for that blessing and acknowledgement to bring us into right purpose, into thank you. Also to our partners, HowlRound Theater Commons, on platform, what we're doing with CAATA, this partnership, healing over hate, responding, as Leilani mentioned, responding to the rise in anti-aging, so important. You see here on the screen, we'll circle back to this wonderful foundation support and organizational support. So, I mention, always welcome your donations, your support, and cover. But I can share with you that here at CAATA, we wanted to use our platform, our leadership, our privilege that we have in being able to be virtual and have our organization of construction American leaders and artists for relatives of our communities to support Middle Eastern North African communities to heal and be empowered. And we also want to be sure that our colleagues and artists can educate themselves to join us in condemning, activating anti Asian hate, violence, and anti-Blackness and anti-Indigeneity. So with that, today's program will begin with this opportunity for us to self-educate, that we can deepen our learning cross-culturally, cross-racially. In other words, build our own analysis. And we have the great honor of CAATA, our Vice President, will offer a very illuminating presentation regarding the history of anti-Asian violence. And then we'll be bringing, in order to make sure we wanted to do our break our community this traumatic time. So in order to help us with that, we will welcome on family therapist, clinical counselor, Ginger Klee, to join us with an important and wonderful presentation as well. So with that, after that, we'll follow with questions. And if you want to ask questions anonymously, please, on Facebook, please find Ariel Estrada. Ariel's name is Ariel, and last name Estrada at Ariel's Facebook Messenger. Again, you can offer a question anonymously, and Ariel will relate it to us. Or if you're on the HowlRound channel, you can utilize live streaming there. So just know one of our priorities is to not only support with these important presentations, so we can all keep our learning moving forward, to work together cross culturally, but hear from you. We don't want to wait delay this any longer. It's my deepest gratitude for the service of KT Shorb, who contributes to CAATA as the Vice President of the board. KT is also the producing artistic director of Ensemble Theater Company. And this fall, we congratulate KT as they will be joining the Department of Communications, Film, and at Allegheny College, Assistant Professor of Acting and Directing. Congratulations, KT, on that new position. So please join me and KT Shorb. Thank you for joining us today. I want you now to share your presentation, and I'll be back soon.
Very much, Leslie. For a very brief history of anti-Asian hatred in the states as is disease and their representation. So ever since the people of Asia came to the United States have been associated with infection and invasion. First coming to the fore in the form of anti-Asian sentiment against Chinese enclaves, Asian people began to symbolize degeneracy and squalor through depictions of opium addiction. Chinese immigrants became associated with smallpox, plague, STIs. Angel Island, the point of entry for all Asian American immigrants, became a major health checkpoint. This idea of Chinese other bodies as contagions led to the Chinese Exclusion Act, which was the first act to exclude people from the United States based on race. The Chinese Exclusion Act led the way for numerous other exclusionary laws and practices aimed at immigrants from Asia. This general anxiety about infection and invasion from Asia was personified in the yellow peril, an insatiable, feckless caricature symbol of the Orient, who was hell-bent on taking over decent American soil with its inscrutable and incalculating ways. The yellow peril has been equally concomitant with its counterpart, the minority myth. The minority myth has been a racial wedge that simultaneously renders invisible the economic and social struggles of working class and refugee Asian Americans, while delegitimizes claims made specifically by the Black community about racism. Meanwhile, this orientalizing gaze has led to dichotomies in gender. Women of Asian descent are portrayed as either subservient lotus blossoms or villainous and sinful dresses, both to fulfill the exoticized sexual fantasies of white men. And these are both images of Anna May Wong. And men of Asian descent are either feckless criminals trying to corrupt blonde white women, or are acting as obedient domestics, doing quote unquote women's work. In the depiction, they are deemed sexually castrated and impotent. In both men and women, they are either evil villains or good, dutiful acolytes with no nuance or room for multiple dimensions. This dichotomy between evil and good Asian plays out in health, as Asian bodies become seen as evil contagions versus impulse and care. Whether as diseased opium addicts wanting to colonize California, Filipino Florence Nightingales, Asian Americans have often been seen in close proximity to health. Our association with disease periodically returns. Swine flu, bird flu, and SARS are just some recent examples where disease steadily becomes associated with Asianness. The most recent, of course, being COVID-19. Touted as the Chinese virus, or Kung Flu, by our own seditious former president. And this is, in fact, Trump's very own notes for a speech that he gave. Rather than taking steps to limit the spread of a much anticipated pandemic, white supremacists have taken aim at people of Asian descent as scapegoats. The tragic massacre in Atlanta this past March, where 8 people were shot and killed, 6 of whom were women of Korean descent, the most visible instance of this form of scapegoating, combining our association with both disease and sex. This is symptomatic across the country. 1 in 4 Asian American youth have experienced anti-Asian bullying since March 20. And over 3,800 incidents of anti-Asian hate have recorded since then, with some estimating in hate crime 1,000%. And those are only the reported numbers. Other incidents include an elderly Filipino woman being kicked repeatedly while people watched and did nothing in Midtown Manhattan, a stabbing of a Burmese man and his 2 children in Texas, a man spraying an Asian person with Febreze in the New York subway, and innumerable and underreported instances of vandalism, spitting, stalking, and verbal harassment. Much of this violence has been aimed disproportionately at Asian American women. In the first 2 months of the lockdown, 60% of Asian Americans and 30% of all Americans polled reported to have witnessed anti-Asian bias. As a community, we have endured not the COVID-19 pandemic, but we have also felt the pandemic of white supremacy that has been so clearly and overtly infecting the. But we continue to survive, heal. And today is about healing. Now it is great honor the next guest, Ginger Klee. Ginger Klee, pronouns she, her, hers, is a queer, multi-Korean mental health therapist. In her own private California, specializes in trauma and in treating the queer and trans, Black, Indigenous communities. She treats adolescents, adults, and families. Adjunct psychology professor where she teaches about the intersectionality, gender, sexuality, and ethnicity. Welcome, Ginger.
Hello, hello. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor. I wish I had better circumstances. It just seems like tragic things keep happening every day, and not just to the AAPI community. But of course, that's what my talk is going to focus on specifically. So let's get into it. I'm going to talk about heal and how to take care of ourselves from racialized trauma. Would be to identify what you're even healing from. And that may seem simple, but there are nuances and layers we are all experiencing right now. And by first naming it, it allows you to actually fully feel and understand and talk with other people about what's going on. So we all know what this is, but it's big, and if you get into a pair with it, you're not actually helping yourself. Right? I'm very grateful to have not experienced vicious hate crime at the same time. So is all about your experience, your subjective experience. Just because it's not what we call in the EMDR therapy world a big T trauma does not mean that it is not hopeless. All of those are traumatic. They're overwhelming. They're assaulted. Being a victim of a fire. Traumas. Have a lot in common. Not quite sure if the person meant it. Exactly what it is. Someone calling you, ask. Yeah, they just want to know. To question reality. And if it happens in a singular time, then it might not seem that bad. But if it happens over and over again, every day, the rest of your life, microaggressions add up. They more powerless. Gaslighting is something we generally refer to with an abusive relationship, particularly an emotionally and psychologically abusive one. It's when people question you and your graphic on the right-hand side is a great example of racial gaslighting, right? Well, what I did isn't racist. Right? I'm not a racist person. I didn't mean it in a racist way, or it's just a joke. Why are you going to be so sensitive? Right? And all that does is dismiss your experience. And it's not them taking responsibility for what they're doing, for their ignorance, for their actions. And it makes you feel so small and like your feelings, your race doesn't matter. And microaggressions add up, right? Microaggressions contribute to prejudice, to, to actions and crimes. So if we really actually started to tackle more about microaggressions and those experiences in we don't talk about enough, it's called acculturative. Formulation is that the stress or acculturation is here out in textbooks, in research, and in the clinical world that I'm. Simulation is completely changing yourself. I say an immigrant comes to the United States, they leave all of their cultural practices and values and simulate into American culture. But that's not what most people do, especially Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. We don't, because within the United States, we are exposed to a new culture. Consciously or consciously, to act, to change, take on some of it. Right? The longer we're exposed to it, it's going to happen. And there's nothing wrong with that per se, but because you can feel or disrespect ancestors where you came. And also, like, I shouldn't be feeling so scared or make it feels like my identity because I've changed, because I adapted or white Eurocentric cultures. And that can bring up a lot of inner conflict. I know that. This duration, whatever it is, doesn't stop people from seeing and treating you. I do have the privilege with I am attacked and my full Korean family members, my full friends, mean that I am mistreated, and that doesn't mean that I do not experience stress on them. And how much of a culture see that I don't care. And honestly, it shouldn't matter if you've a culture or not. really. Different topic. You couldn't tell. So let's go on. We've all likely heard about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. You do not need to be in the military to have PTSD. It is different than what we also call complex PTSD or CPTSD. A in little traumas. And what makes complex PTSD more difficult, I mean, it's even in the name, right? It's more complicated. It's from traumas that happen, again, over time, for weeks, for months, for years, for most of your life. And one feature that makes CPTSD different than PTSD is what's called an emotional flashback. When we generally hear about traumatic flashbacks in portrayals of media even, we generally know about auditory and visual flashbacks. Right? But emotional flashback, a feeling, that's so much harder to identify. That's so much harder to identify as a flash. You flash back to feeling like you're 12 years hiding in the fear. Flashback to being belittled by friends and bullies. And it can make you feel and scared like you're a child all over again. And when we experience that, we identify because it's not obvious. Being and only being overwhelmed or just being stressed. Because you're not accurately identified that it is an emotional flashback, to be grounded, to get a hold of yourself. You can even feel childish. As you're an adult suddenly feeling like a child again and you don't know why. Kind of the word triggered nowadays, unfortunately, the whole triggered thing. If you're experiencing an emotional flashback, you are triggered. You are traumatically, and it's so much harder to feel like you can real of yourself. So if you've ever felt like a situation is currently at a 5, like a stressor, you're responding at an 8, 9, 10, something else is going on. Now, it doesn't always be an emotional other things that contribute to overreacting to something. But if you're constantly feeling emotionally reactive, start to yourself why. Or something I actually encourage my clients to do, how old do you feel right? Difference between complex PTSD and PTSD. And for those of us who live with prejudice, racial biology, exhausted from acts and all these things happening all of the time, to experience symptoms. What are between the two? Well, as you heard me say, you feel like you're constantly under attack. Alert. So that's what we call hypervigilance or hyperarousal. Feeling on edge. You feel like you need to be at times. And that can lead to having an response. You go into, I'll talk more about the fight, flight, freeze. So I'll get back to that in a second. We're very good at distraction. That's the number one thing we turn to nowadays, especially because of social media and our phones, right? We want to connect because we want to feel, because it feels so overwhelming that if we feel like we focus on it, we're going to lose ourselves. We're not going to be able to come back, which is generally not true. But we're scared it's going to happen, right? Or we feel like we just have to keep going. We have to keep pushing forward. Something to lose this fight, which is why sometimes that also leads, right? Because you're not honoring them, allow making the time to feel them, to talk about them. The never pour of bad news that has been 2020 and 2021. It's harder to pay attention, remember things, because your brain is overactive. It's also going to negatively affect your sleep. Now, I'm not trying to make everyone think that they have complex PTSD, by the way. Many more have trauma. Even if you don't have PTSD, which hopefully you could like symptoms, still benefit from working it. By talking going on, your trauma now, it actually prevents it from becoming PTSD. So let's dive more into fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Now, some of you might be a little surprised to hear that there are 4 F's to this alliteration. Right? This flight, right? When you or freeze, to way here to fight. Fawn raised on with variety. And like, more like a lot of people in the AAPI community, we're better. We're not going to say anything about that. We're just going to let it slide so that maybe we can have a little bit more privilege. That's what fawning is. Fawning our attackers, our perpetrators, our the fear get enough recognition. You can start changing. There's a that help as you can hear, top left, bottom left. Most more so say my brain. Cortisol, by the way, we all experience it. Cortisol is helpful in with trying helps you run away fast, more attention to your hands, keep you. Yeah. Don't want too much cortisol. Cortisol is not good. Cardiovascular issues, etc. So what you see in the PT, it's not just in one part of the brain. Your emotional response. It's literally you on the for healing. They're healing from what's going on isn't terrifying. Trauma. The next slide. About this. We are still through trauma from our ancestors. It affects us in so many ways. Family patterns exist for the good and many of us have experienced what's called historical trauma. You were hearing KT talk about the various types of trauma and oppressive events that have occurred for the AAPI community that affected the entire group at the same time, who also had less access to resources because of that oppression, because of the prejudice and discriminatory policies that existed. That affects your brain. So if you have a traumatized brain and you're raising a child with your traumatized brain, it's going to be a lot harder to raise a non-traumatized child, to be there for the child in a way that you would without a traumatized brain. But not only that, back to that pass those and level, unfortunately. Historical events and ones that does not affected by them. Of community to heal from it. Family. Not decrease past generation. The next slide is just a quote to my girl. It's not your fault that the stuff happened. It is your responsibility to do something about it now. When extreme responsibility broadens responsibility. Back to the difference between responding. And it can be frustrating. You know, it's like, I don't want to just be the bigger person. I don't want to be the one who I, so that's real. But experiences are real. Subjective experience, valid. To be able to get into the men and with what kind of people. Hopefully, we again respond, ground yourself to your reactivity through those fully start to trust. More. I know the Asian mental health. I have a that I will veer away from about medication. Medications can't. I too quickly. Even the says if you do have PTSD, that's medication #1 recommended treatment for people. So let's go to the next space to be in. This is trial and error. You can try out a person fit for you. Please do your best to empower yourself. Choose your therapist. Interview them for what's 20 minutes for free. Ideally for me, at least half hour, but what is the work there to be anti-racist? Do they have experience working with your community or not? Right? Ask them those questions. If they are the right one for you. I personally years cultural competency. It's 7 years, it. Not. We did a lot of other good work on things, but then when it came to working on identity, multi-ethnic, Korean, and queer, 2020, no longer the right fit for me. I went through this journey myself, just because as you can see, there are not so much more than what's actually on this slide. There are so many diverse directories out there for a variety of communities. The next point might be a little bit hard to hear. There's a difference between healing, right? The whole title of this talk today is healing, right? Can't heal yet. That's still the goal. But really going to be able to prepared for it, get some tools that will help you get there. But as long as you're in the forest and they're still chasing you, you're not able to do the deep trauma healing of feeling safe from the bear, because the bear can still attack you. So there's a good reason to not be healing yet from safe places, safe people. As long as you're in a constant toxic, traumatizing environment, it's not going to happen. Therapists, people can use, and then of course we're talking about a systemic level of feeling unsafe. That's why so many of us are trying to find systems safe. Therapy can be one of them. Trying to tear away places. There's so many to yet another rest. Community. For those of the group, we need community. It's not in there. In order to heal, we need social activity. That's a active action and collect healing. Boots. Blood, family to heal you, to fight with you. You know, former, but I used to choir. Collective healing, to say with collective healing, is singing and performing in a choir. Sometimes you take a breath and a position up more. And of course, you don't want to affect the performance, so we do what's called breathing. Take turns. Do that together. Next, that's self-care. The identity. But that didn't stop treating me differently, even though I didn't realize that's what was going on. talking how much we overuse distraction. Observing and identifying how we feel, making time to feel the unpleasant emotions, to name them. Radically things that we can. A lot of us get scared because we feel more. Since too many, so I do some reading for you. Just the racial healing is the self-help theories that you can walk through that can help you walk through your own racial healing. And then this is actually written about Black slavery. However, also a really great read that also touches then and also, I believe it will be shared. There are so many it's called virtualization. You know, you don't just have to go to the website. Agents will post and post talks for our community. Certain type of media can what you're going through. Part of this one. That was you in such a short, but to invite you with to kind of debrief.
Figuring that out. What we might encounter within ourselves, as well as the resources that we might be able to find. So thank you. Follow-up questions, but I was the very last something about rest as resistance that you racism is like such a I think that people have been overusing term self-care. Oftentimes it's a to put anyone on the spot, but I think it was Leilani who said, did you say OMG for real? Yes.
Uh-oh. My mom. I think, I mean, I'm trying to, what am I saying? I'm pulling it back to the work that I do with CAATA. We work with a lot of groups. Right now we have a partnership with the Program for Torture Victims.
Oh, so sorry. I think it's a lag in there, isn't it? Yes. Go ahead, Leilani. I didn't realize. I think there's a lag in my.
So Leilani, go ahead.
Okay. I can't hear Leslie. That's all. Let me know. What was I saying? I was saying that, well, with the work that we do here at CAATA, this is something that, you know, we try to work with counselors and talk about our work in theater. When we first started working with Laotian refugees, when we were creating Refugee Nation, we talked with a therapist and counselor at the very beginning because we were afraid that we would, you know, in our interviews, we didn't want to be responsible for triggering any PTSD responses. And luckily, the therapist was telling us how they talk to people with PTSD, and a lot of it is talking about dreams and experiences. And so we were like, hey, we were assured that we were helping. And of course, we did come across some people for whom they couldn't even talk. They just the thought of it started making them cry, and we would back away. We'd be there for them. We'd talk with them. But oftentimes it was, I don't want to talk about it because, and then the whole story would come out. Mm-hmm. And so for the work that we do in devising theater, this is such important information because we want to help bring these stories to the stage, but we don't want to be responsible for further traumatizing our communities.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Leslie, can go ahead and thank you so much, Leilani, for that. I think that a lot of us theater makers try to find the balance between curative practices and, you know, re-traumatizing the communities we're trying to serve. So that's like, it's very helpful to hear the process that you went through in order to address those community needs. I think, Leslie, are you back with us, Leslie? I know you had wanted to. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, Hailey, I'll go after you since I kind of cut out and came back. Please go first.
Okay. I wanted to say thank you to Ginger for all you shared today. It was very validating and also allows us to, for me personally, to sit back and analyze. This is the first time that I heard about the 4 Fs. I always thought there was 2 Fs. Yeah. And as you were explaining fawning, I thought to myself, oh my God, that's what we were socialized to do as Hawaiians, right? We were, you know, told to show aloha at all times and be, you know, docile, yeah, and agreeable, right? So I really appreciate what you shared there. That kind of opens up just a whole line of thought that I need to go and process. But I had I wanted to ask about, being in, many of us work within predominantly white institutions, and there seems to be, um, we seem to be held to a higher standard in some ways. And I was wondering if you had maybe one or two um, coping mechanisms or thoughts on that, on how to deal with being in those situations
Being in the situations, in PWIs.
in a PWI. Yeah.
I think one, it reminds me of community. If you have if you're in a PWI and you're surrounded mostly by people who don't understand your experience, to find people, whether it's in person or virtual, who can validate what you're going through, to help you talk through what you're going through, to help you maybe sift through some of the gaslighting that might be happening at your PWI, but also to help you realize how much to take on. I know a lot of Black, Indigenous, and people of color are being asked to be on like diversity, equity communities now more than ever because of 2020. And you do not have to do that, right? You do not have to take on that role just because of your identity. That's just, to me, seems a bit placating, or the other word is kind of escaping me at the moment, but making sure you have support. If it's not at your work, to have it somewhere else. It also can help you assess whether that's still the right fit for you, right? Or where does that fit in your life? How do you want it to fit in your life? What role do you want this PWI to be in your life? I think is why it's so important to have people from an outside perspective with that.
Mahalo, mahalo.
I guess I could go next. Thank you. Yes, Ginger, mahalo for this incredible presentation. And KT, to have your presentation that set that up was really powerful combination. I guess my question is thinking about historical trauma and the intergenerational. As I think about how we curate, I'm a stage director, so how I'm and an artistic director now, so I'm thinking about how I hold space. And I consider my own background as Yonsei, fourth generation Japanese American, of a descendant of World War II concentration camp survivors and non-survivors, as well as knowing the history of, like, say, that the camps were built on the reservation, Indian reservation system, and everything that came, with colonization and white supremacy culture. So I just think about all of those connections, my own relatives, and then holding space when I'm working to decolonize this theater I'm working at now. Gratefully, I have a staff that's on board, and we're all navigating our own complex identities, intersections of identity, and how we are together in this learning space. It's complicated, but we carry so much with us as we're working to do the good work. I just thought, any thoughts around that? That's a whole dissertation, I'm sure, but those are thoughts that I hold as I'm working and learning.
As you're talking about looking at your family and where you come from, it makes me think of, back to, like, again, reclaiming your identity, or naming what your family has gone through, which again can be very painful, yet it can be a bittersweet experience. One thing that I was assigned to do in grad school was create what's called a family genogram, where you don't just create your family tree, you identify what your family's been through. And the more generations you can identify, the better. What did their relationships look like? What were their hardships? What were their strengths? It can help us not just see unhealthy family patterns or the historical trauma that we may have gone through, but also our resilience. What resilience has been passed down in our families? How did they take care of themselves? And could we also learn to bring some of that back?
Mahalo, domo arigatou gozaimasu. Thank you. That's powerful. I'm taking notes. I'll do that.
Speaking of taking notes, I've also been taking notes. But something you just said, Ginger, has been, it's the idea of resilience. To me, I feel resilience to be kind of like an energy and a power that I know that I can draw upon, that in some ways like connects me to my community and connects me to my ancestors. And I also have heard a lot of people talk about how resilience can sometimes be a synonym for, you know, just taking it and letting the racism, etc., happen. I'm wondering if you can speak to how one can kind of determine, and also to Hailey's, the fawn, that was new to me too, and like I immediately kind of was like, oh, that's such a like an immigrant response in a lot of ways. That's like my mother's response to racism is to fawn. And so the resilience and fawning, how do we tell the difference, I guess, is a question I have.
That's a great question. I think for one, it would be like, what am I doing this for? Who am I doing this for? Am I not taking on this like battle? Like back to that client who kind of did go into fawn to a degree with them, the health professional. You know, is he doing that for himself, or is he doing that for the sake of the person? Am I not saying anything to avoid a fight because I'm exhausted and I need the rest, or because I feel like I have to, because it's the polite thing to do? And also, even though he did stay silent in that moment, he didn't stay silent afterwards. He named it and shared it with someone else. He didn't tell them that they should go and do what they did, but he still named and honored the experience, called it for what it was. And, you know, other people can help us determine whether to fight or not, right? Because he has that support system, he was able to, in a way, delegate it to someone else. Also, give ourselves permission to not take on every battle. That can be a form of resilience too. That is one of the hard things about, especially microaggressions, that whole damned if you do, damned if you don't idea, right? Well, if I stand up for myself, it's going to be me giving them my mental and emotional energy and that emotional labor. But if I don't say something, I'm going to shame and be mad at myself for not doing so. It doesn't always have to be those either two options. Give yourself permission to not have to educate every single person who, you know, does a microaggression or is prejudicial to you. You don't have to, it's not for them. It's not always for them. You can start to do, again, not resisting or not fighting for yourself, because we can't do every single battle. It's impossible.
Yeah.
That's very good advice. Thank you for that.
Leilani, did you want to go ahead and?
I feel like I've just been to therapy myself. You saw right through me, Ginger. I'm like, I feel naked. And I'm looking at this group of colleagues and leaders, and I know that I personally need to do more work with my own healing. And yet at the same time, I ask, what are some thoughts we can take as leaders around how can we help our community heal and create, move, you know, I think that's, now that we're launching that series, that's a question that we're asking ourselves, and maybe there's some thoughts you have for us to think about. I mean, thinking about what you were just talking about and how, KT, you said it was a like sort of fawn is an immigrant response. And Hailey, you were talking about how Kanaka-Maoli also have fawn as a response in a different way. And we have seen so much in Hawaii of that then imploding on each other. You know, we're under this AAPI heading. And yet we're trying to bring a community together that oftentimes we are in proximity to each other. So we're taking out this on each other. And I find myself, if I'll speak for myself, I find myself in the middle of all of that and loving this whole community, but knowing that we do harm to each other. And I keep asking myself, what can we do to help create more understanding?
For me, it makes me think of being willing to be vulnerable, right? As you all were just, some of you all have already done. You're already talking and identifying like, yeah, I relate to that fawn experience. That way, by being someone who starts the conversation, it invites other people to join in. It helps other people feel a little less scared, a little less reserved, to start their own healing process. That's why more and more people sharing their stories, even if it's brief, can help draw other people in. I've had some clients who didn't realize that they were victims of prejudice or microaggressions until I named it for them. We need people to, again, name it, to talk about it, even though it's scary and vulnerable.
I think that that's such a important point, and thank you, Leilani, for bringing that up, because we work under such a very wide umbrella here at CAATA, and the ways that we manage that can sometimes be complicated by our own internal white supremacies, I think, which I feel like bringing that up towards the end of this episode may be a can of worms, but the healing that we need to do, we need to commit to doing together. And I think that takes so much intense trust and generosity, you know, within this umbrella for CAATA, and then also amongst BIPOC, people of color communities. So this like you were talking about, Ginger, how you can't heal if you're surviving, and I think that our healing with each other needs to, you know, be, there's something about parallel healing that I don't know. I don't know if you have anything to say to trying to heal with others, like, and how that, what are some strategies or some things to keep in mind for that?
And worse initially, because especially the more people who witness it, the more powerful the feeling will likely be. And I think well, in a way, our brains almost are instinctually trained to want to veer away from that, because again, that feels almost can feel almost life-threatening to expose ourselves in such a way and to feel maybe the intensity and gravity of the situation. And yet again, that is exactly and precisely what will help us heal, because it helps us externalize it. And the more people that witness it, not to say that you should like go on a grand stage or anything, but by having more people witness it, it again makes it more real and valid. One of the reasons why trauma becomes PTSD or can become PTSD is because we're just keeping it all in. It becomes a secret, a toxic secret that just spreads like a virus. Maybe I shouldn't use that word right now, but you know what I mean. and sometimes we need to create them for ourselves. For myself, me and a few of my colleagues started an API therapist group for ourselves. It didn't exist, and so we created it. We meet once a month, and it's been one of the main things that's helped me survive and begin a healing process with what's been going on this last year. So if you can't find it, then you can start small and just find one or two people here and there to bring together.
Yeah, it seems critical, especially right now. Not that we haven't had other times in history, but I know we're getting on in time. But I just want to mark that we're at a time when we're working and we know we need to heal. Thank you for being here, Ginger. While there's still attack or violence still going on, it's like it's all happening at once. So this is so critical that you're here with us offering this important information and some strategies going forward.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I'm so happy to be able to share the information with you all.
Mahalo Anui. Thank you
Yeah.
for being with us. We've had our group therapy, it feels like.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, mahalo. And KT, any last thoughts? I know you had your presentation, the two of you. Oh, I guess we're transitioning. Okay, beautiful. Well, once again, you can find this PowerPoint that Ginger shared with us at www.gingerklee.com, and Ginger has offered resources there. Thank you so much for that. And then, as we do, it's part of our culture, our traditions to offer mahalo anui to our supporters, Doris Duke Charitable Foundation, the Ford Foundation, and the New England Foundation for the Arts, and Theater Communications Group. Next spring, we want to continue to give thanks to the T-shirt theater company, CAATA Theater Company, CAATA.org. You can visit Leilani's company there. Kennedy Theater. And of course, the Queen Lili Ukalani Trust and University of Hawaii, Manoa. Thank you so much. I also want to share that CAATA has been in community with many signatories, and we issued a statement that first week or so after the Atlanta shootings. But I also want to share that this coming Friday, the 1 month anniversary, that's April 16th, of the Atlanta shootings, be sure to visit the CAATA Facebook page and CAATA.net, our actual website. There you can read another statement that we will issue. You can certainly become a signatory and fill out a Google form there as well if you want to be in support. And this statement is basically a call to action, a call for justice from the Asian American Pacific Islander Pacifica theater leaders. And we are also calling, of course, for an end to deadly white supremacy now. So please, if you're inclined, CAATA.net and/or our CAATA Facebook page will help you get to that statement if you'd like to be in support. Also, I can share with you that our next episode will be May 10th, approximately a month from now. And in this new series, Healing Over Hate, we will be able to feature Dax Valdez. Dax is a practitioner from ihollaback.org, and another wonderful presentation around bystander upstander training. And we're looking forward to other guests joining us for that episode as well. So CAATA taking some learning from you know, from Ginger here, collective healing and collective action is our way forward. And that just to remember that social activism is centered in the body as well. So this series is working to bring forward our collective healing, our collective action, healing centered in our bodies to work together in solidarity. With that, I'd also like to say mahalo to our incredible team off screen, Ariel Estrada and Maximiliana Uruz Medi, for keeping us going on this virtual platform. Thank you so much. And of course, if you feel inclined, you're welcome donations. It will help us keep this series going and all of our programming for CAATA that we hope, of course, serves our community. That's our intention. And it's tax deductible. Thank you very much for that skew. And as you can see, we work in solidarity with Black Lives Matters. We're working against anti-Asian hate, anti-Blackness, and anti-Indigeneity. We'd also like to share with you that you can become a member of CAATA as well. So you can go to our website and find out about our perks, and there's a SKU right here as well on screen. Welcome to check us out that way. Also, I just want to give another big shout out to Hailey and Leilani. Thank you for that beautiful, elegant transition from the Return to the Source series to this series. But that doesn't mean ConFest isn't coming. ConFest is coming, and that will be May 2022 in Hawaii. Please be sure to make your plans to be with us. We have that advance notice or continued advance notice. So we are really excited when we can get back together. So that means please hang in there. Check in with each other. As we mentioned, break your isolation, reach out, and be safe, be healthy, continue to wear masks, socially distance, and please get vaccinated in order for us to get back to live theater and to be in community together again. So with that, mahalo, mahalo, anui, more soon. And please, again, stay safe.